Beautiful. All right. Hey, welcome everybody. It is such a treat to be back. We haven't done a glacier conversation here since June when I was at the Native Plant Nursery, and I know many of you were along. Carl and Candy, I know, were with us for that one, and that was a terrific evening. We escaped the rain by about 5 minutes. So thank you for rejoining us in what has been a beautiful fall here in Glacier Country. And we have a real treat tonight in that we are joined by Alex Schnee, who is Alex on the Go. I'm hoping all of you have already started to follow her. If you've not, you're going to be doing a lot of following because she is definitely on the go. In fact, tonight, joining us from Canada, Alex, thanks for taking some time out to be with us.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm so excited about this. When we first started talking about this, I was really surprised and really just appreciate you thinking of me and can't wait to answer some questions and hear from people on what their thoughts are. So this is going to be
Yeah,
great.
it's a treat. You know, as I described earlier, this is a wonderful time once a month or so for us to get together as glacier lovers. Some folks who are on regularly, some like Catherine Parker. Catherine, thanks for joining us tonight. Who are new to the Conservancy, also a travel writer who I met just recently, kind of similar in a similar way, Alex, that I met you. You had reached out to say, hey, I see what you guys are doing. Let's talk about whether there's something we could do together. And I used my favorite word, which is yes. Uh, and then we just kind of figured it out from there. And I learned that Alex was a Flathead native. Her love of glacier is homegrown. So Alex, talk to us a little bit as we kind of start. Give us some of your background, how you came to love glacier in the way that you do.
Oh, absolutely. I've got to be honest. I didn't always love Glacier the way I do now. When I was younger, my parents would take us up for the weekend or for a day when Glacier wasn't so busy. And they would put us in the, backpacks for kids, and we go on hikes with them or go to Lake McDonald, and it'd be freezing cold. And I never really appreciated it, didn't really understand what the big deal was about. But my parents would say, "Oh, we should go up. We should go up." And I wanted to stay home and read a book instead. I was that kind of kid, really nerdy, who said, "I don't like the outdoors. I don't get it. I don't understand it." Um, so after a while, I said, "I'm leaving here. I'm leaving Montana." So I think I was 19 and I moved to New York City, and totally different. Said, I'm going to have something completely different in my life. Moved there, went to school there, lived in Europe for a while, kind of developed my travel writing career and really got to see so much of the world. I think I've seen over 50 countries at this point. So we've really just kind of been all around the world. I met my husband and he came with me. And I remember bringing him back to Glacier. And after going to all these amazing places and just being blown away all over again and saying, wow, I kind of get now what the big deal was all about. Now I kind of understand why this is such a special place. So growing up in the park, didn't appreciate it. Going away, coming back, really learned to love it and recognize as well that the park was different from when I was a kid. It's a very different place now than when I was younger, and we didn't have a ticketing system, or you could just go and it was easy. So that really inspired me to get into thinking about conservation and thinking about how we could preserve such a beautiful place. And again, Glacier being a really special place, my husband and I were married there 2 years ago on Lake McDonald, and it just has really captured my heart, and it always will. It's always the place that feels the most home to me, going back again and again and again. So that's yeah, kind of my story with it. So
I think your story, particularly for people who grow up in the Flathead, is not an unusual one. No one loves the park more than my wife does, but she will be the first to tell you that it took brides
mm-hmm.
to get her to hike in the park when she was a kid. that she needed to be promised new pairs of socks, particularly. That was a working bribe back in the day to get her to hike in the park, and that it is a bit of an acquired sense, because when it's just your backyard, right, it doesn't necessarily feel special. But I think especially now, 50 countries under your belt, coming home always has to feel special, doesn't it?
It really does. And again, just really appreciating what makes Glacier Glacier. I've been to the Himalayas and hiked up to the Everest Base Camp and the Inca Trail and done all these amazing hikes. And for me, it's not even, the hikes are amazing, of course, but it's not even so much the hiking itself, it's the atmosphere and feeling like you really are in another world. You're in another place. It feels like paradise. My husband and I did Grinnell this summer, Grinnell Glacier, and he just said, is this what heaven looks like? I think this is what heaven looks like. And it really does have its own feel and its own special feeling to it that other places just don't.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And by the way, it was not lost on me that someone of this, I'm 61, well inside 61, just rolled out the Inca Trails and the Everest Base Camp as places she's been that are still on my bucket list. May or may not get there. And that kind of leads me into, I'm going to pretend that I'm asking this question for the benefit of others. What's a blogger?
Oh, great question, because it is a little confusing. I think sometimes family members have a hard time explaining what I do for a living. So a blogger is like a travel writer. And what they do is they have their own website. It's kind of like running their own business. So the blog itself is a publication where I post articles, researched articles about places I've been. I work with different tourism boards. Right now I'm in Canada working with them on creating guides and articles that I can post on my own blog, and as well as on my social media pages. So my Instagram, Facebook, now TikTok, because there's always something new. I'm still learning TikTok. I'm not very good at it. So, but yeah, really it's about advocacy of certain places that you really love and want to share with people. And for me, it's finding ways for people to do it responsibly. So that's a big part of what I like to get across when in my articles and things like that.
We shared the link in our in the run-up publication, or the publicity for this event, that you and I had a chance to interact on an article that you were doing for Fodor's travel. And it was about Glacier. So how does an article like that come about? How does that work? Is this something you think of? Does the publication call you? Give us a little look underneath the hood about how all that happens.
Absolutely. I usually come up with some ideas, and I have working relationships with different publications. Very similar to a travel writer. That would be kind of their main mode, is having these contacts. And I would come up with an idea of saying, I really think, because national parks are so busy this year, it would be great to share ways that people can visit them responsibly. No one's doing something that they shouldn't in order to get a pretty picture for social media or something, and really sharing that and making sure people have that information. So I'll pitch it to an editor of the publication, and they'll decide, hey, that's a good idea, or we have too much of that or not. And if it's a go ahead, then I'll contact experts like Doug and say, hey, what are your thoughts on this? How can we add that? And then send it off to the editor and we get it off. So
that was an interesting article. And I think I'd be interested in your perspective. I was able to provide some Glacier content about what is this real dichotomy, if you will, about it being really great that so many more people are discovering our national parks, and then you just don't know if the resource can stand it, right? And so it's a real challenge. And is that something, as you're traveling, that you're seeing in other places as well as just the national parks in the United States?
Very much so. Before the pandemic happened, actually, it was a big issue within the travel industry of how are we going to support so many travelers? And over the past few years before the pandemic, it was labeled the golden age of travel because you could go pretty much anywhere in the world and it was fairly inexpensive to do so. People had more information from blogs and articles than they had ever had before. You could Google Map something instead of getting lost. So almost anyone could really travel if they wanted to, if they had the money and the time. After the pandemic, it's kind of slowly getting back to that. But one of the positives, if you can find a positive in this difficult time, is that people really started thinking, wow, maybe some places have been overrun and maybe they can't support the number of tourists that are coming to visit. So that was a huge problem in other areas, like Bali was a big one in Indonesia. The Great Barrier Reef was a big one in Australia. A lot of these different places, Machu Picchu in Peru, where there were so many people and they didn't know how to accommodate that. So I think we're really seeing it in our national parks this year because everyone's thinking domestically, but it has been a problem within the travel industry probably for the past 5 or 6 years. People have really noticed as a problem.
Yeah, and that's why, and you mentioned earlier ticketed entry, and I can give you all just a little bit of not inside information because it was in a kind of a public meeting with vendors today, but the park is just finishing up kind of looking at some of the statistics of that. We had a 60% increase in visitation to the Flathead Valley this summer. Really remarkable. And ticketed entry, one of the goals was to make it so that the gate didn't close a single day during the high season. And they accomplished that. The main gates at West Glacier and St. Mary did not close a single time this year. Obviously, there was disruption where people didn't get a ticket, but it really did create some smoothing in terms of visitation when you look at the curves. So it'll be interesting. And I use that to get to my next question, which is, are you seeing, Alex, as you travel, those kind of user management systems being put in place in more places?
Mostly the national parks I've noticed. I think internationally people are just looking to have people come back if they can. And that's slowly getting there bit by bit. But really domestically, I know Zion had a ticketing system for a while in Yosemite. So it's really been the national parks, I think, that have kind of employed this method. I wouldn't be surprised if in other places, once tourism starts picking up again eventually, that they're going to have to start incorporating some of these methods, because otherwise I think you are going to have some major problems when it comes to, as you said, preserving these spaces and making them available in the future.
So for those of you who are wondering about my background tonight, we are publishing, the Glacier Conservancy is going to put out a calendar with photographs from our photo contest from last year, which is super exciting. So this is the cover photo behind me for the 2022 calendar. And Alex has been kind enough to, well, Amy, I'll let you describe the offer, and then we're going to throw in a Glacier calendar.
Yeah, so Alex has generously, she has a guide to the best hikes in the national parks, and she's happy to supply that to folks. I will put the link in the chat. And then those folks that sign up for her guide, we will send one of the Glacier 2022 calendars hot off the presses as soon as we get them. So I will put that link in the chat a couple of times. I'll put it in right now and then throughout the conversation tonight. And so if you just click on there and sign up, Alex will get your information and then she can forward it to us.
Yeah, and when we say hot off the presses, I think it goes to the printer tomorrow. So yeah, it really is gonna be new. The photo contest was so terrific, and we'll be doing another one next year. It's a great way to engage the community in our shared love of Glacier. So get those cameras out, and you may be in the 2023 calendar. And thank you, Alex, for that generous offer. It's really neat. Also in the chat, feel free to put in your questions. I warned Alex, she and I had spent some time together on Monday afternoon on the phone. And I warned her that the questions will likely not all be glacier related. So feel free to ask her about Italy or France or wherever might suit your fancy. So feel free to put those questions in the chat, or as always, just unmute yourself. I'm going to ask though, Alex, so talk to us about, so you went to Grinnell with your husband last year. So what are your go-to spots in the park?
Oh, I have so many, honestly. Just being in the park is special for me. So even the places that sometimes are overcrowded or feel overcrowded to me, if you can find them at the right moment, I think Avalanche is a great hike if you can get up super early in the morning and enjoy it. I think it's a great hike for people who are just being introduced to the park. The east side, really, I haven't spent as much time in because growing up in Kalispell and everything like that, but we were over there this summer and really, really just enjoyed it. So for me, the entire park, different corners have different special things about them. So it's really hard to pinpoint one. I have to say though, getting married on Lake McDonald, I will never forget that. That's kind of a hard one to forget. So that's a pretty special place for both of us. And we had our whole family from New York come in and family from Montana there too, because it was just wonderful. It was a really special spot.
So as you're traveling the world, tell us a couple of places that you get to and you say to yourself, you know, this looks a lot like Montana.
I felt that way about Switzerland a lot. Switzerland has the same kind of green to it, I think, in the mountains that Glacier did. Where else?
So where in Switzerland do you travel?
I've only been there once, actually. I was in the Lucerne region.
Okay.
We went to Mount Pilatus, which was great. Really enjoyed that. But some of those little farm villages and things like that kind of tucked away in the mountains with a Swiss chalet style really reminded me of Glacier, of course. So that was really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, Switzerland does have that for sure. That's a neat thing. Have you been to New Zealand by chance?
I haven't. Actually, that's one of the places I haven't been.
Because I do hear that a lot about New Zealand, particularly for those folks who enjoy a little bit of trout fishing. And if anybody's on the Zoom has been to New Zealand, please weigh in. Please weigh in the chat. I have not been, but I have heard from some folks about that. So we'll have to make that number 51, Alex.
Okay, sounds great. Works for me.
So Amy, I see we've got a couple of questions, a little interest in the business model. I must admit, I share that interest.
I agree. I think this is a great question. Alex, how do you get the money to travel? Because we all want to do what you do. Is it ads? Is it sponsors? Is it your writing? How does it work?
That's a great question. It's all of that. So that's the kind of the great thing about this job and why I really love it so much is you get to wear a ton of hats. So you're publishing articles and you do have ads on your website. So you get a check each month from how many different people come in and check it out and click on it. You get also some income if people book either hotels, flights, tours, things like that on your site as well. You can work with sponsors. Actually, that's what I'm currently doing now is on a press trip and writing about different areas of New Brunswick. And they pay me for those articles and pictures and things like that. You can have products. I recently released a glacier or a national park journal where you can document each of your experiences in each of the national parks. So you can paste in a photo and get a stamp and then write about your experiences in that. So I'm getting some sales with that. So you get to do a whole bunch of things and be creative all the time, which is part of the reason why I love it so much.
And just a follow-up question that I have, was it hard to get started? I mean, did it feel like a real leap of faith? Like, oh my gosh, I'm really doing this? Or did you start sort of part-time? How did you get started?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. A lot of people do start part-time, which I kind of did. I've always had a blog probably since, you could blog. I just found it a great way to express myself. And so I've been blogging about 10 years now total. And I went to school for writing. I'm a writer, first and foremost trained. So it came naturally to me, okay, I'm going to write about my experiences online. And I started doing some freelance writing and things like that for other travel publications like USA Today and Fodor's and Huffington Post and things like that as well, which kind of launched my interest in being, okay, I can actually make money from this. I could kind of make a career from it. This is great. And then I worked as an editor for a travel publication for a while and kind of got to experience, wow, okay, I could probably do this myself and do it under my own brand. And then I wouldn't have to have a boss, which would be great. I love that idea. I can be my own boss. So kind of eased into it little bit by little bit and learned the ropes as I went along. I actually started this brand, Alex on the Map, about a month before the pandemic started. So it's only about a year and a half old, which is pretty exciting, actually. So it's pretty brand new. And to see how much it's grown even during, a time when we can't travel has been awesome. So.
Yeah, wow, what a great story. And hopefully you get to do it forever, right? Is that the plan?
Yeah, here's hoping. It's a great job. It really is.
Okay, a couple other questions so I don't take over the conversation. Or go ahead, Doug.
Well, I was just going to say, it's really kind of the entrepreneur's entrepreneur, right? I mean, it really is so many things, and you have to be innovating. And that, as you said, TikTok comes along. It's like you've just figured out Instagram. And I will say it's a challenge for us in our space, right? We want to stay connected with people, and it's a challenge to stay up to speed and decide what to focus on. So yeah, I really I take my hat off to you and others who get into this space and are able to navigate it successfully. It takes a lot of courage, for sure.
Oh, well, thank you. It wasn't the easiest to set up, but it is fun. And it is wonderful to have that freedom with your life in a way that I think would be difficult working another kind of job. So being an entrepreneur was kind of a natural thing for me, but it was a leap of faith for sure. No question.
Another question from Bonnie. She wanted to know, how does the travel experience differ between US national parks and parks across the globe?
That's a great question. We have actually visited a lot of national parks in different countries, especially Southeast Asia. That's been a big spot where we spend a lot of time. Europe as well, some of the national parks there. I would say they are not as iconic. They're not as a part of the culture as they are in the United States. We love our national parks. We wear t-shirts saying Glacier National Park and hats, and we're so into it and talking about, oh, have you gone to Zion or have you gone to Arches? Everyone loves their national parks, where in Thailand, maybe someone might have gone, they might want to go someday, but it's not abnormal to never visit a national park in your life there, or, in Europe or anything like that. It's not really part of the culture. So that's something I really love about our national parks, is we were the first country to come up with the idea. So it's so ingrained, I think, in who we are, and really just having an appreciation for wild spaces. So I really love that. I love how people are so obsessed with national parks in the United States, where in other places they might not like it as much.
So does that mean that some of the parks that you've been to elsewhere are not crowded? You don't see a lot of people there?
Yeah, some are really empty. Some you'll just go and you'll be the only one, and which is great in its own way. You get an appreciation for that spot without a ton of other people there. Yeah, a little less crowded, maybe a little less funded too. So the parking lots aren't as developed, or there isn't a visitor center or something like that. But some of those places are really, really beautiful as well, really equally as beautiful. So that's great.
Carl and Candy would like to know if you've ever been in a dangerous situation.
Yes, I have. Honestly, what scares me more traveling is being around other people sometimes. People make silly mistakes and silly things. I've never felt personally as though I was really in danger for my life or anything like that. I've been to some places where traveling alone as a woman wasn't necessarily the best. Thankfully, you know, I drag my husband along on most of my trips. So he's usually there to kind of keep it safe for me. We actually ran into a grizzly though on that Grinnell hike this summer. So, and I had to use the bear spray, and so that was an adventure, and that was just right at my back door. So.
I feel like you need to tell us more about that.
It's quite the story. We got up super early, you know, because we wanted to avoid the crowds, and so we got up, and Grinnell does get really crowded. We got there, I think, at the trailhead at 5 a.m. So we started out and had my bear spray with me because I knew, okay, that's really important, especially if you're one of the first on the trail. We had another couple in front of us from Texas, and we kind of exchanged words, and they went ahead of us. And I said, that's no problem, because if there's a bear, they're ahead of us. That's great. I don't want to run into one. And then we were about halfway up, and then all of a sudden they started backtracking, and they had actually their pistols out. And they were coming back, and they said, do you have bear spray? Do you have bear spray? Because there's a grizzly bear coming down the trail. And I said, yeah, I do. And, you know, I'm not very tall. I'm 5'2". So everyone's taller than I am, and they all get behind me, and I'm the one with the bear spray. And I'm like, okay, here we go. So this grizzly bear is coming, and he's big. I think he was around maybe 450, 500 pounds. You know, he was an adult grizzly bear. And thankfully, not a mama grizzly bear, no cubs or anything like that, because I think we would have been food at that point. But there wasn't a place really to get off the trail in order to let him pass. But he wasn't really aggressive. He just was kind of like going about his morning and saying, wow, you guys are up very early. You should be back in your tents. What are you doing here? And came a little too close and used the bear spray, and he just went right off the trail, and we didn't have a problem. But it took a few minutes afterwards to kind of relax and say, okay, we're going to be fine. We're going to be okay. So
my heart rate's elevated just hearing the story.
Yeah, it was a little nerve-wracking, I'm going to be honest.
Wow. So.
Yeah, holy cow. I'd be up for hearing any other Grizz stories if anybody wants to put them in the chat or just shout them out, because yeah, you didn't have to go very far out of your backyard to have a pretty amazing adventure.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And Carl and Candy, as always, a great question. Carl and Candy, and this maybe goes completely the other direction, but you were in the park just the other day and took a picture of like the last wildflower. So, you know, it's getting that time of year when we're having to give way from the beautiful wildflowers to, you know, to the snow-capped mountains again, like the ones behind me. And Carl and Candy were driving the road, and well, you can tell the story, Carl or Candy.
Okay, do you want to say?
What?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we were up on going to the Sun Road, and it was the busiest it was yesterday.
Very busy, yeah.
It was the busiest that we've seen it all summer.
Anyway.
And just cars after cars after cars. And so we just, whenever we'd find a space to a parking spot available to turn out, we would stop. So we got by the Weeping Wall, I think or near there, and grabbed a little turnout, and we were just amazed at how much snow is up there on the peaks. But anyhow, we saw this lone little, I think it's a harebell, purple flower growing out of the rock.
Yeah.
It's just like, both of us were just fascinated with it. And all the other tourists are taking pictures up at the mountains and not even looking at the rock side of the road. we're sitting there staring at the rock side of going to the Sun Road Highway.
Yeah, I took the picture, and then all because of that, it was the webinar with the native plant nursery
Yeah, it's
that
all
Doug
because of
did,
you, Doug.
that we volunteered there this summer.
Yeah, the
so we got a
nursery.
real appreciation of the plants in Glacier and how sensitive they are, and the variety.
How strong they are.
Really fascinating.
Yeah.
You know, that's why we stopped and took the picture.
I mean, this
flower.
lone flower growing out of rock and just shale rock, and I'm just amazed at how strong this little flower has to be.
Yeah.
It was blown in the wind, and it had all gorgeous color, just lone flower. But anyhow, we were just both fascinated with this.
But after that picture, we did turn around and take a picture of the mountain.
Very good. Well, and thanks, Carl and Candy, for doing that work at the Native Plant Nursery. You know, it is a very special place for those of you who haven't, like a lot of us who are local, you drive right past the headquarters to get to your hike, right? But turn into the headquarters area one time and stop in at the Native Plant Nursery. They do volunteer Tuesdays. Every Tuesday, they'd like you to call and kind of just schedule, because they'd like to know who's coming. If you know that I put popsicles in the freezer, like Carl and Candy do, you can know that there's popsicles in the freezer as well. But yeah, so that's a neat thing to be able to do in the park. Now, Alex, by the way, you know, this chat feature does allow me to talk to your younger sister.
I know, she popped up and I'm like, there she is.
And so she was kind enough to, I was telling her how amazing you were, which she already knew apparently. And she offered Iceberg as a favorite. So,
Icebergs are great. Yeah, that's a great spot too.
So would you like to review her selection?
You know what? I kind of trust her. I really think that's a good choice. That's a good choice. Doug and I were talking on Monday and just saying, you know, again, what are the number 1 and 2 hikes? He had a visitor coming in and asking that. And it's so hard. It's so relative. You know, everyone has their own special hike that they love the most, but Iceberg is a great hike. It really is.
Jake Bermonti, who many of you will know and who has been on our Glacier Conversation as well, hiked 734. He hiked all 134 miles in Glacier in 1 year, and then did a map. I think he has the most elegant answer to what's the best hike in Glacier. And he says it's the hike when you're with people who have the same expectations.
I love that.
You know, that you want to get to a peak, or you're going to bag a peak, or you're going to take a little wander by the stream, or you're, you know, going to have lunch at Grinnell Glacier. Because I think that really is, it's about that experience, right, of being together in a place and having an experience that changes you in some way, whether big or small. So I've always, Julie and I both have kind of latched onto that as kind of our response. And it translates to a lot of different things, right? When you think about that. So that's neat. Anyway, Amy, I know we've got other questions people want to get in. So, and our time is limited, so let's get back to it.
Yeah, my other addition that I was going to add, also a Jake Bermonte story, is when he was doing hike 734 and he had a day that he wasn't very excited about, sort of like not a fun trail. And I think the weather was not great. And that's where he saw 2 wolves in Glacier. And so he would tell you that you never know when you're going to be surprised, which is, of course, the magic of Glacier. And it looks like Bonnie had a similar bear story. This was a black bear in Grand Teton. And he wasn't aggressive and no need for bear spray because they were able to step off the trail. But it sounds like she had quite an experience as well. Thanks for sharing that, Bonnie. So it looks like your sister has a question. Alex, she wants to know, what type of content do you find resonates most with your audience?
And that's a funny question that she would ask, because her career is also in internet marketing as well. So that's a question that she and I have talked a lot about, actually. I really find, for me, I'm never going to be the Instagram influencer with the pretty dress up at the top of the mountain and the gorgeous photos. That's just not who I am. I get sweaty hiking. I don't look great while I do it. I really just enjoy being outside, even if it's not going to get the most likes or views or whatever. So for me, really being honest and being authentic with people and saying, okay, you know, I had a hard time with this hike, or, you know, this is a difficult experience for me traveling because of this reason. really I found content, the more honest you are with people, the more they appreciate that honesty. And they appreciate that you're not going out there and saying, oh, I have the most amazing life and nothing goes wrong. And that's so easy when you have such a cool job and you're out doing amazing things all the time. Sometimes some of those things are hard. You know, it's hard when you lose your passport and you're stuck in a country that you're ready to go home. It's hard when something medical happens and you don't know the health care that you might receive, some of that kind of stuff. So really just being honest with people and saying, okay, you know, you might run into a grizzly bear while hiking in Glacier, and you know, it's exciting, but it can be very nerve-wracking. And if something goes bad, then you know you're in a tough place. So again, really being honest with people and saying, you know, you're going to have a different experience than I might have, but this is the experience I had. So, and just being really straightforward with that.
That's interesting. I want to kind of dig into that a little bit, because it's got to be a little bit tricky to provide content that you know are going to engage with people in a meaningful way, but also, you know, you've talked a lot about your caring about the capacity of the place, the protection of the place. How does all of that, and so you've got sponsors and people who are helping fund the enterprise. You've got people who are the clients, if you will, the end users. And then you also have your cause and your personal viewpoint about what kind of statement you want to make. How do you balance all of those three things? That seems like juggling a lot of things in one.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And it's a real ethical dilemma, I think sometimes. It's something that if I'm really not connecting with a brand or I'm really not connecting with a place, I will be straightforward and say, you know, this is not the place for me. I've been to a few places where I thought going into it, okay, I'm going to write about this. It's going to be great. I went to Thailand and went to Bangkok, and I was like, this is going to be a great place to be. Did not like it. I don't really write about places that I don't like. And if people ask me, I'm really honest. I really try when I'm looking to outreach with sponsors to choose sponsors that I really connect with. I'm not just going to choose to work with someone that I don't feel aligns with the same mission I do. So I recently worked with a bourbon company called Yellowstone Bourbon, and they paid me for some pictures on my Instagram. One of the benefits is for all of their sales, they donate a portion of those sales back to the national parks. So that was something I really believed in, and I was excited to promote because that's something that they believed in too. But it is a fine line, and it's really sitting down and doing your research before you contact someone, or if someone contacts you, sitting down and saying, okay, what's their history? Do they have a history of conservation? Is that an important ethical concern for them? Or are they really just trying to get as many people as they can in because they want to, you know, get the tourist dollars? So again, finding that balance is not always the easiest, but, you know, trying to do research beforehand and seeing what you can come up with.
And is there a place in your kind of business journey where you're better able to do that because you've got a larger breadth, you've got more things out there, more people? Does your voice become stronger, do you think, as you are able to have more longevity and security in this blogging space?
Definitely. I think, you know, my confidence has grown a lot over the past few years. When I was first starting out, it was a little nerve-wracking, especially even working as an editor for a travel publication. And these were concerns we'd have a lot of the time is we'd have people contacting all the time saying, we want to work with you. How can we work with you? The older I've gotten, the more used to the industry, the more I know it, the more I can say, yep, that's a good fit, or no, that's not a good fit. And hopefully I say it gracefully, hopefully I say it kindly, because it might totally work for someone else and it might be a good fit for them. But yes, the older I get, the more involved in the industry, I do feel more confident in saying, okay, this brand's not right for me. I'm not starving, you know, I built a business up enough that I can say no to this, and that's okay. So
it's really an interesting space and a growing space, which is exciting. You know, I think that the guys at Tom's kind of, to some extent, invented this cause-based commerce, if you will. You know, buy a pair, give a pair. And we've enjoyed some partnerships like with Cotopaxi recently, who has a really amazing sustainability record. They're very passionate and vocal about it. And it's quite fun, I think, to see that starting to emerge in the outdoor space. Are you seeing more of that as we seem to be?
Absolutely. I think, especially in the future, brands are going to have a record like that, because people are getting more involved and they're smarter, and you can do more research online about a company than you ever could before. You know, instead of just going to a store and saying, wow, that looks cool, you can do a quick Google search and say, hey, you know, what is their environmental record, or if they have a record at all. So getting a really, I think it's just easier than ever to kind of know whether or not that's a good fit for you. And I think they're gonna be held accountable as well. Before the pandemic happened, a big thing in the airline industry was carbon emissions, and how planes were now being accountable and saying, okay, we have to lower our carbon emissions. How are we going to do that? And how are we going to make it possible to continue the tourism industry, but also make sure that we're not hurting the environment as we go along?
Yeah, that's cool. And I see, Amy, thank you for once again putting up the link to Alex's guide. Again, Alex, thank you for so generously offering to provide that to our guest at Glacier Conversations tonight. And we're going to throw in a calendar with the cover that is behind me. I see, Amy, we've got a couple more questions. One about gear. So it's a perfect segue.
Yes, and as always, Carl and Candy, thank you for your questions. Alex seems to be a hot topic whenever we talk with anybody who hikes. But what kind of hiking boots do you prefer? Or shoes, for that matter? Some people don't like boots.
That's a great question. I have had the same hiking boots for years, and they've held up so well, which makes me so happy because I don't have to break in a new pair. This year, I'm going to have to retire them though, I think. So my parents, at the Cabela's store, when they opened in Kalispell, we went to Cabela's and we bought their brands that they had for snow trekking. And they're kind of like chunky boots, but they're also really flexible. And what I liked about them is I could use them in any type of weather. I've had them almost 6 years now, and we've hiked hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles, my husband and I, and they've held up until this season. So I'm kind of sad. I'm really attached to them. So, but they were kind of my first major purchase that I made into hiking gear. And so now it's kind of, I'm sorry, I'm really sad that we're saying goodbye to them. So
I think people feel that strong, especially when they find something good. But you got to tell us what brand. What are they?
They're on the Cabela XPG, and I don't think they exist anymore. I really don't. I've been looking into Keen. I've been looking into Sportiva, La Sportiva, and I just haven't quite. I'm so picky now because I know what I like. So it's going to take some testing, I think, before I find a pair that I like to replace them.
We'll be looking forward to the photo on the blog.
Oh, you'll get it. Yeah, it's going to be a really sad, like, you know, maybe I'll have a little mini funeral for them. I don't know. So we'll see.
I definitely think you need to contact Cabela's and tell them your story. Maybe they have an old pair sitting in a storage room somewhere.
Oh, here's the hoping, right? That'd be amazing. That'd solve all my problems.
So Carl and Candy also asked, and I think this might be a good transition into, because you also write about food and restaurants, but they wanted to know if you've ever experienced unusual food choices in foreign countries. And yeah, I'd love to hear about your food writing.
Oh my gosh, I love food. Food and hiking and outdoor, they go hand in hand, right? After you're done hiking, you want a really, really good meal. It makes the hike even better if you can eat well. Yeah, unusual food choices. We've had some pretty unusual food choices, which they're not unusual in other countries. That's just what people have and what they've gotten used to. For us, it would definitely be unusual. When we were in Vietnam, we've had some chicken feet. That was one. Vietnam was a really good place for unique foods. We had congealed pig's blood that kind of came in like a little jello sort of thing. Not my favorite. My husband was like, it's great. I have no problem with this. So it's just different tastes. We once had in South Korea, it was traditional, a live octopus. So what they would do is they would take the octopus and chop it up, and it would still be wriggling, and you would put it in and chew it really fast so it didn't get stuck in your throat with the tentacles. And so that was unique for sure. But we love trying new foods. Kind of try to find that local choice that people love wherever we go. So that's a big part of what we like to do when we travel, for sure.
Wow, super interesting. You're much more adventurous than I am with the food.
I'm glad that Lisa has reminded us to loop back to Everest. Tell us a little bit more about your Everest experience.
Oh my gosh, it's a big backstory behind that, but I'll try to keep it condensed. So my husband didn't like hiking. He didn't like it at all. I drug him on this hike in Guatemala. I thought we were gonna break up. We didn't break up, but he said, I'm never doing a hike like that again. And I said, totally fair. I understand if it's not your thing. I'm not gonna make you do that. So we continued traveling and trying weird foods and, having a good time. And little by little, he started kind of coming on these hikes with me and started coming along, and he kind of started to like it. And we saw this deal to hike to the Everest Base Camp hike. And it was too good of a deal to pass up. I think it was $1,000 total just to hike up to Everest and back, which I've never seen it that inexpensive before, because sometimes we do pay for our travel places that we really want to go and it's just not available. So we were looking at the deal and I said, oh, I would love to do that. That is something I would really love to do. And he said, okay, we'll do it. We're going to do it. We're going to do it. And he said, but under one condition. And I said, okay, what's that? And he said, I think we should get engaged up at Everest Base Camp. And we're going to make that happen. And I said, all right, I think we can do that. So we have been dating, I think around 4 years at that point. Hiked all the way up. We brought our rings all the way to Nepal with us and hiked all the way up to the top and exchanged rings and got engaged at the Everest Base Camp and then hiked down. And the hike down was definitely less exciting because the whole way up you're going, I'm going to get engaged up at the top at the base camp. This is going to be awesome. And then on the way down, you're like, well, I guess it's over. I guess I'm engaged. So cool. Like we're going downhill now. So but it was great. It was really wonderful.
That must be quite a sight to be at the base camp and look at the ceiling of the world, right?
It's really amazing. And, it's again, kind of like any multi-day hike where you're invested in it. You're invested in the entire action of saying, okay, I'm going to plan. I know what foods I'm going to eat. And just every step, getting to that destination and finally getting there. And yeah, it's just as amazing. And then to see, oh wow, that is the tallest mountain in the world. It's amazing.
And remind me of the elevation at base camp. It's stout. It's not,
Yeah, I think it was 14,000, I want to say. Maybe a little bit more than that. I'm not positive, but yeah, I'd have to double check.
And that's another place that, brings to the forefront this, this idea we have, right? That we'd all, I think, love with capability, we'd all love to go to Everest, but we also know it's getting overloved. You've all seen the pictures of Hillary's Step. It looks like a conga line. And, you know, those are real challenging things when you have a planet that has 7 billion people on it, and how you manage those. So yeah, it's an interesting world in which you navigate these kinds of things, for sure. And I have a deep respect for that. I also someday want to say the quote that I just wrote down from you, which is, sometimes we pay for our travel. So that's going to be one of my life goals, is to be able to say that quote someday.
Oh, thank you. That's great.
So Amy, I think there was another question. There are so many that I'm losing.
Yeah, there's a couple more. Mary Kate wanted to hear about packing light tips. I guess, speaking of multi-day hikes, what do you take, Alex, and what do you leave behind? What are your must-haves?
Must-haves. Definitely, I got solid boots. Need shoes to change out of when you're done with the boots, but they can be light, you know, sandals or something like that. I try never to forget a raincoat and a nice light jacket, layers. Pretty much everything else, if I don't think I will wear it more than once, I don't pack it. Even when on a trip like this, where we had access to checking our luggage, we really try to pack light. So, you know, kind of outfits that I can wear more than once, especially on a multi-day hike like that one. I'm going to wear the same pants for 5 days, and that's just how it's going to be. So just accepting that, yeah, things are going to get a little dirty. You might need to, if it's a travel trip and not a hiking trip, you might need to wash them along the way. You might need to find a laundry service or wash it yourself. Or, you know, worst case scenario, you don't pack it. You can always buy it wherever you end up. I think that was a big thing early on traveling, finding out, oh, wow, okay, I forgot my jacket, I can buy one. Or, you know, this seemed like a really heavy thing to bring. Maybe I don't want it. Maybe I can get it wherever I'm going. We picked up a lot of hiking gear for my husband in Peru, just because it was cheaper and easier. And then when we were done with it, we left it at our hotel and said, here's some free gear for anyone who wants it. And then, you know, got good use out of it. And if someone else can, that's great too. So.
Well, I think everyone on this call knows this, at least about Glacier, which is that in the national parks, when you do that at a visitor center in a national park, that store is run by a nonprofit. In Glacier's case, we run those stores, and they're run to the benefit of the park. So we love the sunny day in the valley and the cloudy day at Logan Pass, because people end up buying jackets because they need a jacket up at the top. And that's a great win-win. They end up with a jacket, and the park ends up with some money, because again, we donate, as does every Friends group who runs those in any national park in the country, donates that money back to the park. So it really is a win-win situation. So I think there are a couple of questions about what's upcoming for you and what you're looking forward to.
Oh man, well, we're kind of quiet. I think actually the next trip I have planned is maybe a trip to Arizona in December. We're kind of trying to keep quiet because we've been really busy. We were in Colorado in May, and then Montana in June and July. August, we were in Alaska, and then now we're here. So I'm like, I think I need a little break. That wouldn't hurt, so that'd be nice. And then after Arizona in December, we'll head home for Christmas. So we'll go back to Montana and see my family. So
that's awesome. And speaking of things coming up, our next book club, for those of you who are book clubbers, a very important book, Black Faces, White Spaces, by Dr. Carolyn Finney. She teaches at Columbia. We are really challenged in our country, where we have a inclusion problem, particularly in public places, and more specifically in national parks, where the minority community, and particularly the African-American community, is severely underrepresented and just doesn't feel welcome in their own national parks. And Carolyn has written an amazing book about that, and she will be joining us from Middlebury, where she teaches for an hour in October. So don't miss that. It's a really important conversation. It's like you, Alex, we try and engage in conversations we think are really important. And this is one that's important to all of us to think through how we can be better. And I'm looking forward to, I've had a chance to visit with Carolyn. She's an incredible national leader on this topic, and I think everyone will enjoy her. So put that on your calendar for things upcoming. Amy, I think there might have been an urban quest question.
Yes, I didn't want to miss Robert's question because this is an interesting one. Alex, and you might have something to say about this, but Robert says he's a native New Yorker, now living in Boulder, Colorado, and he wants to hear about any urban New York City hiking adventures.
Oh my gosh, that's a good question, actually, because when we were in the pandemic, in the midst of the pandemic, we weren't traveling, we weren't going anywhere. So we spent a lot of time trying to get out and what natural spaces we have in New York City. We love Prospect Park. Prospect Park is in Brooklyn. We live about 5 minutes away. It's I think the second largest urban park in the United States. So there are a few little hiking trails, little opportunities to get away from other people, which is great. I also highly recommend heading up to the Hudson Valley. It is about an hour-long train ride from downtown Manhattan. And it's got some amazing state parks, some great hikes. Actually, we did a hike there. I think it was, it was on our anniversary. It was for our anniversary. So we went up there and did that, and it was a difficult hike. Some of the hikes up there are pretty tough. So an hour away, head up to Cold Spring. Cold Spring's a great spot, and you can get there by train. You don't even need a car. So it's great.
I shared your link one more time, but just a reminder to everybody. And I had one more question, Alex. You mentioned Bangkok as being a sort of surprise, not your favorite. What have been your surprises that have been really positive? Maybe places that you didn't think would be so great that ended up being great.
Oh my gosh, so many places where I was kind of on the fence and saying, it'll be nice. South Korea was definitely one of those places for me. I loved it. Speaking of people who love nature, South Koreans are obsessed with hiking. They are obsessed. Every weekend they're out on the trail, they're in their national parks, they love it. So that part, was amazing to me, just in terms of how much they love nature. The culture there is amazing. I love Vietnam. Vietnam was another place that I wasn't really expecting to like all that much. People there are wonderful. Really enjoyed that experience. Oh my gosh, so many. Bolivia. I love Bolivia. Again, another great nature destination. We did some mountain biking there, and I always learn something new, and that's why I love this so much, is just learning something new about, and having my expectations totally change about a place or people or food or whatever it might be. So.
Well, Alex, you now have, a few dozen new hiking potential hiking partners in Glacier when you come out. And I really thank you so much for spending the time with us tonight, and for the voice you're giving to our special places, and particularly Glacier, and the message to take care of them, because they are only remain for future generations because of the care we take them, right? We're just temporary stewards, and it's our responsibility to pass them on. And it's our mission at the Conservancy. That's our whole mission, to preserve and protect Glacier National Park. So thank you for giving voice to that around the world, with Alex on the map, and in the many other ways you do that. And you are now an official part of the Glacier National Park Conservancy family. So welcome aboard. And we hope that you will not be a stranger, and that you will come and visit us when you come to Montana next.
Oh, you know it. You're never gonna get me to leave. You'll be like, okay, guys, Alex, you're not in the family anymore. Bye.
Hey, it's a digital life you lead, so you can pretty much do it anywhere. That's our message.
Thank you so much for having me. It was wonderful.
Well, thank you. And thanks everybody for joining in the fun. We'll be back at book club again in October with Black Faces, White Spaces. And then we're going to have at least 2 or 3 more Glacier Conversations this year yet. And then we'll look forward to yet another great year in Glacier. So thanks everybody and have a great rest of your night.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks everyone.